I gave myself 2 hours to beat GeoWizard's incredible 10 seconds no moving, panning, or zooming record. Here's how it went. Make sure to give this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more. Things started out insanely well in the first couple minutes when I nearly had the perfect seed to beat Tom. We started out in the UK with yellow backplates, those road lines, and the architecture. I had to just go for London hoping it was right, and incredibly it was there with only 96 points dropped off a perfect score. Round number 2 was very Nordic looking. That white van in the distance had a sort of turquoise teal plate on it, which is something you see in Norway, so again I just had to go for Oslo hoping it was right. Thankfully it was also there, so 2 really good starts for the game. Round number 3, however, dropped us in rural US, which looked kind of southern from what I was seeing, the fence, the architecture, the trees, but everything else was just so vague. I had to click Kentucky, it was North Carolina, so losing way too many points there. But then the last 2 rounds had to bait me, they had to be big cities as well. This one was New Zealand, where I ended up just going for Auckland, again following the big city meta of default world map. And it was Auckland, and I was really hoping round 5 wasn't going to be just so obvious, but incredibly, it was. It was Thailand in a big city, which you gotta go Bangkok on, and I was so hoping that it wasn't going to be there, but it was. So if round 3 hadn't been the middle of nowhere US, if it was another city or something, I could have beaten Tom on one of my first games. This first game really exemplifies just how luck-based this is. You pretty much have to get all cities to have a chance at a good score, otherwise it can just be the middle of nowhere where you have not the worst guess of all time, but it's just not enough points to get the high score. I kept up my attempts, and about 10 minutes in, I was able to get another very nice game where we started out in what looked a lot like Texas based on the trees and the architecture again here. This reminded me of hill country, so I went for Austin. And it was actually there, which I was really proud of. Nailing Texas was a great feeling, and getting into round number 2, we had an extremely Belgian-looking farm and everything there. The road is super Belgian, that brick house with the orangey roof. I just kind of clicked north of Brussels, hoping that was a good hedge, and it ended up being a bit farther west, very close to France. The score was already too low to beat GeoWizard, but I kept on going. Round number 3, we had a lot of New York plates, looked kind of suburban, so I clicked out in Queens, close to the suburbs of New York, and it was actually Queens. I was really proud of this guess as well. The 4th round was a low cam coverage. You can see the blur of the car is wider, and everything is very Japanese, architecture, the poles and everything, so I just had to click somewhere in Japan. I wasn't sure at all where to go, and it ended up being just Tokyo or just west of it, and not nearly enough points once again. Final round was also extremely hard. This was just a random trekker through the forest where I had no idea other than it looked North American, so I just plonked in Pennsylvania and it ended up being in Indiana. The final score of this game wasn't the worst of about 20k, but again, just a couple rougher rounds in there, dropping way too many points to even have a chance. As you probably know, either from playing it or watching people play it on YouTube lately, the default world map has a lot of US and Europe. I might be one of the stronger US players out there, but it's notoriously difficult even for me. Combined with the harsh scoring of default world map and this fast-paced format, the US brought me a mixed bag of results. Sometimes the American rounds did bring me some unbelievable guesses, like this highway off-ramp in the middle of nowhere at first glance, but looking at it more, it felt a lot like the suburbs near my home city of Chicago. I clicked northwest near Schaumburg, and incredibly, it was there. But then we had rounds like this, which was also going to be in the Great Lakes region based on the architecture and the trees. I ended up going for the Milwaukee suburbs, but it actually ended up being near Detroit instead, so I lost way too many points to make that attempt worth continuing. At this point, just over half an hour into my attempts, we got another game which started out very strongly. We were here in some Canadian city, and I could see very far in the distance that sign said Cornwall. I knew Cornwall to be very close to New York in Ontario, and incredibly, that was also the daily city in our Discord server literally hours before on the same day as these attempts. With Cornwall fresh on the mind and fired up by that guess, I went on to round number 2 where I saw that parking sign had some Swedish language on it, and again, knowing the big city meta for this map, I had to click just near Stockholm, and thankfully, it was indeed near Stockholm. 2 rounds into this game, I already had a fantastic score. Round number 3 was a little bit trickier though, just rural Spain. You can see the long antenna, the Spanish language, the Spanish road lines. I had to just hedge near Madrid anyway, it's in the middle of the country, but not quite close enough and dropping too many hundreds of points to top GeoWizard. I finished out the game though, going on to round number 4, where we were in the Baltics somewhere with the foliage and the road. A bit of a wider gravel road made me think Latvia over the other 2, so I went for that. And it was indeed Latvia, just up north. And round number 5, we were in California from the poles. The trees and everything in the distance to our northeast felt more northern in the state than southern, so I just kind of clicked by Sacramento, hoping it would be NorCal. And it ended up being just the Bay Area. The final score here was 23.5k, just a little bit higher than the high score from my previous video, which is linked in the description by the way. That was my last decent game for a while, and for almost the next hour I had horrible luck with seeds. On several rounds I had amazing guesses, but they were immediately followed by way harder locations, or rounds where I got the country right, but was just too far for the high score. This game started us out in the United Kingdom, which I could tell from the driving side of left, the yellow backplates, and the road lines, but the architecture felt a little bit more Irish aligned, so I went for Northern Ireland, just clicked Belfast. It was a little farther northwest, but I was really proud that I got Northern Ireland out of that, but then the next round was just middle of nowhere Sweden. I clicked just west of Stockholm, and it was way farther north in the country, so immediately just like that, score is done. A similar story out of the start of this game, where we ended up in Canada with the single yellow line and the trees, but the red soil is an extremely Prince Edward Island thing, so I had to click there just in the middle of the island. That was a lucky plonk and starting out really strong for this game. But then we had Brazil in round number 2, which was rather nondescript to me, just in a random city. I went a little farther north, I went in Recife, and as you see, it was not anywhere near there. Once again, a few minutes later, we started out in Italy, where we had the language, the license plates, the architecture, and everything. It felt a little bit farther south in Italy, so I figured Naples would make a lot of sense for this one. Went for it, and it was Naples, so I was starting out very strongly. Round number 2, though, brought us into some strange trekker in a park, which didn't really have anything going on. The fence there on the left felt a little bit English, though. That was really all I had. I was trying to go to switch to London. You can see I switched too late, though, so I ended up going near Birmingham, and it was just London. This game wasn't much of anything, but I was really proud of my Switzerland guess to start out, where we could see we were in Switzerland from the low cam, and then we had French language on the pole there, so I went farther west in the French-speaking part, and had an incredibly lucky plonk for the 4984. This round isn't really that good or anything, I just thought it was funny that we were in Home Depot on the world map, and we had a lot of palm trees around, license plates looked Florida, so I think I just plonked, yeah, Orlando on this one, and not too bad, it's down by Naples. At about 90 minutes in, after many guesses like those, I finally completed a game for a good score. Here we had French language and an 01 area code, which you see in Paris and its suburbs, so I clicked right downtown, and we were just south. Round number 2, I'm so proud of this guess. We are here in the United States from the trees and the road line. For me, this was purely vibes. It looked a lot like the suburbs of Philly in Pennsylvania. I clicked there, and it was there. I couldn't believe it. I was so proud of calling that out, and kept on going for this game. Ended up here in Argentina with the black car and that pole on the left. And here I think I just went for Buenos Aires hoping that it was there, and I believe that it actually was there. Yeah, it was. 3 rounds in with good scores, but I had dropped enough points to be below GeoWizard's score already. Round number 4 was once again the US, just a random suburb which felt like Oklahoma, Kansas to me. It was actually Springfield, Missouri, which wasn't a terrible guess, but you can see the scoring is just so harsh on this map. Dropping 700 points for that, and then in round number 5 we ended up in India with the shit cam, as it's so lovingly referred to. Here with all the palm trees and everything, it felt more south than anything else, so I just kind of hedged over by Chennai, and that wasn't terrible at all. 23.1k as the final score here was really good, but just losing those few hundred points every round takes you well below GeoWizard's score, and turns what is a good game into just another failed attempt. This round is more funny than anything, at least it's funny to me. We started out on a sidewalk trekker in a city which I didn't really have any clue what was going on, but the realization hit me. I thought this was going to be Evanston, which is just north of Chicago. Reminded me a lot of that and the Northwestern campus. It ended up actually being in Chicago by the Loyola campus. Any locals to the area, I'm sure you can see the humor in that, and yeah, just found it kind of funny that I screwed up that. It was still a really good score, only dropping 17 points off of 5k, so I moved on to round number 2, and this was just somewhere in Ukraine, so I didn't get nearly enough points. I got a couple other nice urban vibe guesses that I'll show you guys here before the next full game. This one was, again, the United Kingdom with the architecture and the yellow backplate. Felt really Scottish to me based on the landscape and those homes as well, so I went for Glasgow, and it was Glasgow. I was so happy with this one. For me, it's always nice to region guess the UK, a country that I have so much family in that I've been to a lot of times, and it always is such a great feeling when you get it right. The other thing about World Map, which you've probably noticed, is there are so many trekkers. Here is another trekker on a college campus next to a student rec center and some sort of Rams-looking logo on there, which I wasn't familiar with. The buildings felt like Colorado, though. I clicked just near Denver, and it was actually Fort Collins, so I somehow got that one kind of right. You can see I was disappointed, though, because I had already dropped too many points, even though that was a really great guess for not knowing the logo, just losing too many points to beat the Wizard. It didn't take too long for another good game, though, and this one started out with Chicago. Chicago once again. We had the Sears Tower to the northeast. Using my knowledge of the city and the fact that we were on a bridge, I felt like we were going to be near Pilsen. Clicked right there on that bridge, and I was literally one bridge away. 4998 points for that. I really wished that I had the 5k on that round. It would have been insane, but I was so happy with this 4998 anyway. This game was off to a promising start, and round number 2 brought us once again to France. We had very French architecture, one yellow plate, which is the older French plate that you see sometimes. I clicked just in Paris, and it was there. 2 for 2 so far in this game. It was going really well. Round number 3 was once again India's terrible camera. With that car, I felt like it was Delhi, and I clicked there, really hoping that it would be. I needed this to be Delhi, and it was there. 3 rounds in. Excellent, excellent score. Still ahead of the game to beat Tom. Round number 4 was random US. It's always rural US that feels like it just messes up my games. I went for Louisville, Kentucky. Kentucky's always a go-to for me, and it was the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Sheer disappointment and frustration once again as rural US ruins a great seed. And the final round was rural Finland, so I just clicked in the middle. Got my final 4,000 points for the almost 22k. At this point, I had less than 20 minutes left in my 2 hours, so I had to kick it into high gear and get some crazy games going. I started up this game with 18 minutes left on the clock, and we started in Texas with the Texas asphalt there, that sort of salt and pepper look to the road. We had a lot of palm trees as well, so I thought this was going to be the Rio Grande Valley, all the way down by Brownsville type area. I just had a random block, and it was incredibly close. I was just happy to get the area right, but for it to be that close too was a stroke of absolute luck, only dropping 19 points, and on to round number 2 as well. This one looked extremely tough at first. It's just the middle of nowhere with vineyards and a slight hill. Realistically, I didn't really know what it was other than it felt like northern Italy. I clicked near Slovenia, and it was actually Slovenia, I think. Pleasantly surprised by my foliage region guessing there, even though I missed the country and dropped too many points. And then we had just random Thailand here, which ended up costing me too many points once again. Here's another really great Texas round, and I'm really proud of these because they're both skill-based. They weren't really just following the big city meta. Here we had, again, Texas asphalt. The foliage felt like west of Houston to me, so I clicked around there, and it was incredibly not too far away. Those 2 rounds were within a couple minutes of each other, so I was really feeling the Texas power, but then everything was ruined by going Buenos Aires on Rosario, Argentina. Immediately after this Argentina blunder, I started up another game with 15 minutes left. This was in Russia. We had winter Gen 4 coverage, which you see a lot along the Volga Valley. I decided to just go for Volgograd, hope it's right. And by a miracle, it was Volgograd. I was so proud of that one as well. Starting strong for this game. Round number 2. We were in another city with more Argentina plates, so this time I again had to just go for Buenos Aires, hoping that it was there and not Rosario once again. This time, I got lucky. It was BA. Moving on to round number 3, I was feeling powered up. This one was Thailand, which is brutal. It's rural Thai. I decided it was probably going to be northern in the mountains based on the mountains that we could see. Clicked north. And I was north, it was north, but I'm just too far. You can see dropping a few hundred points again, so below the GeoWizard score. But moving on, round number 4 was the UK, a very British road that we had, and foliage too. Clicked London, it was just northwest, again dropping hundreds of points. And the final round here was just a random forest, which I actually don't even remember what I went for on this round. Let's see. Oh, this was so lucky. Yeah, I went for France, and it was actually not that far away. I couldn't believe this one. And that ended up being my new high score, 23,881, almost the 24k. This game was really nice because it did have a couple of skill guesses in there. Round 5 was a bit lucky, but I also had to make the French foliage call, so I was proud of that. But after a couple more failed games, my recording on OBS hit 2 hours, and that was the end of my attempts. 10 seconds NMPZ is tough, especially on this kind of unbalanced, harshly scored map. With enough luck and patience, I have faith that I can beat GeoWizard's score soon. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more videos like this. Don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.